Now, 2024 was an awesome one for me, so I'm just going to recap it with some of my best powers across the power curve from the year. So let's start with some of the sprints. Here is the overall graph. Feel free to pause here to have a look at any of those numbers if you want. Going to start with the 1 second and the 5 second. Done on the first day, I got my new bike from Mackay Cycles. 1200 watt badge on Zwift accomplished, and then a 5 seconder later in the ride at 1090 watts. I'll play some of these shorter ones all the way through and then just skip through the longer ones. 15 seconds to win the race. I had this one in a previous video. Very low cadence one for some reason. This one up the little New York finish. It was a really close race. I was still trying to catch someone from the breakaway here with a group of guys on my tail. It ended up 976 watts for 15 seconds. Just held on for the win as well, and a nice celebration. It was my first win in quite a while. Now, 30 seconds. I did my best, not filmed. 855 watts. It was a time trial on what was Indivilo. My second best, though, was at the World Champs in the sprint race. So I'll play this one through. There I am on the left, coming through for an FTS segment. Basically, had sprinted for 15 seconds before the start to reach top speed. My World Champs recap video for anyone who wants to watch it is on my page. I crossed the line at some stage about now. The goal was to get your fastest sprint time in a 15-minute period, and that moved me up to fifth, which was an awesome start, and I'm happy with it, as you can see right there. Best minute was 656 watts. Now, this came in a tiny race in February. It was all over the place, very sloppy. I've attacked at 950 plus watts to try and jump in a wheel with 800 meters to go. It then eases up, and then we have another kick to the finish line. Now, I think the way this was produced shows that 656 probably isn't my peak for a minute. I think I could get closer to 700 if I really focused in on that effort in good shape. But we kick up again up into the 700s, and it turns out to be a 656. I actually did my best 3 and 12 minute of the year on the same day in my MyWhoosh Power Passport test. So I won't play too much of this one because it's simply me just holding a steady wattage. But I produce a bit over 500 watts for the 3 minutes today, which is about 8 watts a kilogram. I went out pretty nicely and then had to bring it home hard to get the average back over 500. Yeah, I think in this test you get a 20-minute zone one recovery before doing your 12-minute test. I then did 12 minutes at 407. 407 for 12. I actually did this 2 or 3 times for the year, so it's probably one that I could maybe do a little bit more than if I was all out, but still PV numbers of all time and another one for the year. Now, the 5 minute is probably the one that I am proudest of from this year. This is the one that I think is the difference maker between what's made me kind of have some of the results that I have at the top level this season. So I did a few over 470 actually, including at the World Champs semi final. But my best for the year was actually in the Indy Velo Grand Tour. So they created a prologue, which was a 4K or so time trial, which I knew would take a bit over 5 minutes. So I had a bit of a crack at it, and I had really good legs in the warm up. So I had a really, really good hit out. So basically, I rode this to the course. You can see the elevation profile on the bottom there. There's a bit of climbing in the first 2K. My plan was to hit that really hard, get out above pace, have a little bit of a breather down that little descent, and then steady on between 2.5 to 3K. And then from there, start ramping up to the finish with a big kick over that little red steep climb that's in the last few hundred meters. I wasn't necessarily going for power PB, but the numbers were coming out really smooth today. You can see up over 600 watts, which was a sign that I was in really top condition at that point throughout the year. So we'll just fast forward to the latter stages. So I'm now coming up into the final 500 meters. I'm currently averaging 468, and I still have quite a bit left in the tank. The last bit's a pretty hard effort up over this little steep gradient, but we managed to get back up over into the 500 plus range as we start our kick for home. Now, the 5 minute power on this day, the peak was only 471. However, I did 5 minutes 25 or 521 around there at 475 watts. So that comes out to be 7.5 watts a kilo, which super proud of. As I said, it's the most world class performance in my power curve. 20-minute PB was set in a chasing tour race in June. This is where I realized that my form had really started to come together. It was in a race. My plan, I think I was racing Honda here. My plan was to do like a hard 30 seconds to start the climb and then settle into around 400 watts for a few minutes. I'd then repeat that until I was solo, hopefully, and then I could kind of settle into my own power. So I'll fast forward through this one. Uh, Over the bridge, I have a second attempt to drop Honda, which actually manages to work, and then I can settle in. Now, throughout this effort, uh, in my head, I wasn't really going for a 20-minute. So I think I did the first 5 or 10 minutes really strong at like 400 watts plus. And then from there, I just kind of rode to the terrain, and the motivation for it to be an all out 20-minute test wasn't really there. So for this to be the PB number, I was really happy with because as you'll see later in the climb, it includes some of those dips in the epic KOM where I actually super tucked a bit. I did some zone two on the little descents, and then just kicked it up in the harder sections. So it was an effort to the terrain, not an all out 20-minute test. So I think um, at this stage and at the peak stages of the season, that 400 watt barrier was every chance to go for 20 minutes. This one's maybe the one I'm second most proud of. So, the FIR had some events over the Olympics on multiple platforms. This one was a 40-minute hill climb time trial. And once again, I set my sights on this one as a bit of a hit out. No intentions to kind of average these kind of powers, but right from the start, things came out pretty well, and I just went with it. So, opening up in the first kilometer, and the average power was around the 370 mark. So just checking in around 10 minutes into the climb, and my average power there is 372 watts. So feeling pretty good. Heart rate's up at 166. So still got quite a few beats to spare there. And from memory, I was feeling like this was going to be a pretty good day. As we approach the 20-minute mark of this climb, heart rate's still 166, 167, averaging 371, so the power hasn't dropped off too much there. I'm feeling pretty good and controlled. It's certainly a solid effort, but I felt like at this stage, I think my goal was to average close to 370 the way that things were coming out here. A bit of a three-quarter check, and the heart rate is up now into the 170s. The average power is the same, and I'm soon going to start to wind it up. There's a little bit left in the tank. I've paced the effort really well, and I'm now knowing how close I am to the top of this hill. There's a bit of motivation to try and finish the climb within 40 minutes. So at the 37-minute mark, and I start to really ramp things up now. Average is 373, but this is where I start to go for home. Last 3 minutes, I know I can make it. When you've done an effort of that kind of evenness, sometimes you find there's a bit of top end left that you can exert, especially when I was in the shape that I was in here. So this was the end of July, so probably about 5 weeks out from the world semis. In terms of my fitness, this was probably when I was peaking. I still probably had a little bit more to go in terms of my shorter efforts and that kind of thing to prepare and sharpen up for the Worlds. But fitness wise, this was probably as good as it got in 2024 and ever so far on the bike. You can see on the graph now some redder numbers, which shows the intensities up there. The heart rate's now up towards max. The average power is lifting, and I'm really trying to strive to hit this finish line before 40 minutes. So I'm into the last minute of the event now. I can see the banner just up in the distance, and I'm now constantly up over 400 watts, trying to get to that finish line before the time runs out. I thought that would be a massive achievement on this course in a timed event to actually clear the course. 20 seconds. Can we get there? And obviously, I wanted a 40-minute effort, so for 39.50, and we keep riding for another 10 seconds. So 376 watts for 40 minutes. Really happy with that one. Now, in terms of 90-minute efforts, not a distance that I cover regularly, but I had a couple of good little races over this kind of time frame throughout the year. So I did this one. You can see the mini map at the bottom. It is 3 laps of a probably 15 to 20-minute hill climb. I actually rode a race on this course and made a video about it last week if you want to go back and have a look. My goal here was to do 3 really strong 15-minute climbs at around 350 watts. But there was some good competition from some of the guys and some of the bots. Turned out on lap 1, I made a strong move to try and drop Matthew, who tried to stay on, and that pushed me to go a bit harder than what I had planned. And from there, with some of these threshold-based bots like Wendell Shannon in the field, I really had to treat it as a bit more of a time trial to stay away. So along the flatter sections, I settled into somewhere around the 300 watt range, as you can see in this section here, before then settling back into 350 or so on those climbs. At this stage, I'd never really done 3 20-minute climbs back to back at this kind of power. So I was happy that I was able to do that. Now, to average 313 watts on a course with this much descending was a good sign, because I spent a lot of time at zero, back to the same on the bottom of lap 2, into that tempo kind of range. You can see all the easing off the power on that graph there where I was doing no watts. Got about 2 minutes over Wendell Shannon, so the wind's looking good, but now I'm trying to finish out with a really good threshold or solid effort up the climb, which we're staying in around that 350 to 360 zone for the most part. On this lap, I treat the downhills a bit harder because it's closer to the finish line. Coming up towards the 90-minute mark now, a bit of 500-600 watts over the short punches. And then down onto the finish, I was kind of really kicking for the line at close to 400 watts to round out a really strong race. I think the normalised for this one was about 335. So I've done that quite a few times for races of this length. But yeah, this was my best 90-minute power of the year. Certainly nothing exceptional compared to some of the races I've seen from some top guys, but this was my best 90 of the year. And finally, I don't do many long efforts, and this wasn't a race, but my best 3 hour power for the year was 277 watts. This one wasn't an all time PB, not too far off it though. This was simply one of my long rides that I do regularly, where essentially I ride all of the climbs at a tempo pace, strong tempo, and then try to ride zone 2 for the remainder of the ride. So I did the Four Horsemen, but put my own spin on it. I went up the Hillycomb, I went up the Volcano KOM. Then from there, I went up over to the Epic KOM and the Radio Tower. You can see all of those sitting pretty steady at around 300 watts. My average for the ride so far is displayed in the heads-up display there. Heart rate's pretty comfortable, but for the most part, it was certainly a solid ride by the end of 3 hours, averaging 277 for this one. So up the Radio Tower next. We then head over to the Alp. The Alp was the longest climb of this route. Being midway in, it's a bit of a mind game, holding that power up there. I allowed myself every 5 minutes a quick breather to get some nutrition in and a good wipe of the sweat towel. But settled in for the most part there. Then we went over to the, instead of continuing the Four Horsemen route, we put our own spin on it. We went up the It's a Com and the Mayan Mountainside Com, down the grade, back up the grade. Treated those exactly the same, and they were my 8 horsemen. From there, I just kind of cruised in, bit of zone two, down towards the flatter sections of Watopia to finish the ride. So that was that. A nice ride. I really like to do my long rides in similar fashion to this. I'll often give myself a bit more recovery on the descents, but today I kind of kept into it. And finally, here are all the powers in watts per kilo based on my average weight for the year of 63 kilos. Hope you enjoyed that one. I know it's probably not one for everyone, but really happy with my 2024. So I thought I'd create something a little bit different just to kind of show that some of the numbers that I achieved and accomplished throughout the year. So cheers for watching. Happy New Year. We'll see you around soon.